I've always really disliked activists and activism. The whole concept has always rubbed me the wrong way as a subculture of people. And first of all, this makes me a black sheep in terms of being an intellectual, someone who's counterculture, someone who is queer. A lot of people who are those things are also activists, and certainly growing up and being a teenager in high school, those people were activists. But that whole phenomenon rubs me the wrong way because it's very. There's a low-level anger that is underneath that whole thing. People are just angry. They're against the system. Fight the system. And there's this tension of let's go in and break down the other side. And it's a very battle, warlike oriented type. Two people with opposing viewpoints. And I would almost bet $1 million that those two people underneath actually want the same thing. So, I'm queer, and I sit here, and obviously ideally, I want everyone to be okay with that. More than okay with it. I want them to think it's a beautiful thing. The person sitting across from me is totally against queer, gay, anything. They think it's an abomination by nature. And we're sitting together. But what we want, underneath everything, is we both want a sense of peace and stability in the world. It's just that the way that peace is going to manifest is different. For me, we get peace and harmony and happiness by people accepting people like me who are queer. For this other person, we get peace and harmony by getting rid of that which disrupts the harmony, which for them, being queer, being gay, being bi, whatever, disrupts the harmony. So even though we have these opposing viewpoints, it seems, what's beneath that is actually the same. We both want peace and harmony. So what kind of activism do I propose? I propose an activism of connection, and this is something that is best done probably one-on-one or in small groups. It's not done on a mass scale, but it's one where you actually create a connection with I would say your enemy, but with the other side. This kind of connection, this kind of activism is a spiritual endeavor. And by spiritual, I mean deep purpose and meaning and interconnectedness. It's an endeavor of spirituality because when I'm sitting face to face with someone who represents the other side, I am spirit, meaning consciousness, the consciousness that permeates all matter. It's experiencing itself. So spirit is emerging through both of us beings as we face one another, and it's experiencing itself, manifested in these two very different ways. These very different beings, not only how we look physically, but how our brains are wired and how we think. And so we're creating a deeper connection, and we're healing if we form the connection and we're successful, then we heal a little bit of that separation that I believe is at the basis of all of our suffering, is a sense of separation. I remember when I was first coming out, and I've had more than one coming out experience. I've come out as bisexual, I've come out as queer, pansexual, I've come out as kinky, I've come out as transmasculine. And I was always afraid when I was reaching out to other queer people, because so many queer people are activists, and so many queer people are activists with a chip on their shoulder, the kind that I was talking about where they're angry, and I was afraid to reach out for them because I was afraid of saying something offensive, because I was only just coming out and I didn't have the language of that culture, and I didn't know what to say, and I was a little afraid, and I imagine that a lot of people feel that way. I was afraid because it almost seems like the people with the chip on their shoulder were the upholders of morality. And I would ask them, now, looking back, I would ask them, what transphobia do you have? What transphobic thoughts and feelings do you have? Because surely none of us are perfectly pristine beings with no offensive thoughts whatsoever. When I started out, I definitely had those thoughts. I remember thinking to myself, wondering, contemplating my own transgenderness, my own transmasculinity, or trans guyness. I remember thinking, oh no, I can't be one of those. You know, as I was thinking, you know, what am I? You know, I have these thoughts, I dress in drag and it feels so right, what does this mean? Oh, I can't be one of those people. And the thoughts in my head were of these ugly looking creature, Frankenstein-like grotesque creatures with scars all over themselves, and surely I wasn't that, because that's what a trans guy is, with kind of weird voices as the testosterone starts to take effect. And I just was very freaked out by that. I was freaked out by that. And I look back at that, and the me who was having those thoughts was ignorant and naive. I don't think that way now. There are as many people as there are on the planet. There are that many ways to be trans, and there's not one kind of trans guy that, you know. And now I am a trans guy, and I'm who I want to be, and I don't have those thoughts. But the point is that I did. And I would have never admitted it to anyone at the time. Absolutely not, because it would have offended somebody. But that's the truth. And I've had other thoughts like that about other people, and just like we all do. That's the point, is that it's our human nature to have all kinds of thoughts and emotions. If you have a certain kind of thought, you are not alone. So remembering those thoughts I have, I can now go to people who don't understand, people who haven't been around a lot of trans people, and they haven't had any exposure, and so they have those fearful thoughts and those prejudicial images and offensive type thinking that's just ignorant, and I can meet them at that ground, at that level, because I can relate, because I had those same thoughts. I have that same confusion. The confusion that someone feels when they're walking down the street and they see me and they wonder, they're trying to place me. They're like, what are you? Are you a man, a woman? Are you trans? Are you a dyke? What are you? That same internal, for many it's turmoil, but it's a kind of confusion. I live that confusion. I feel that confusion. For me, I love that confusion. That's part of my life purpose. And for other people, the confusion is turmoil and it's painful, it's suffering. But for me, I like it. Nonetheless, I feel it. And so do you. And so we can connect. And we can have a conversation. And true, for instance, not every trans person wants to be the person who has to educate everyone. I can be that person sometimes. Sometimes, when I feel like it, I can have that conversation, and a connection happens. And that's a very spiritual thing that happens, because it's spirit manifested through matter, spirit separating itself into matter, and then coming back together to form this connection of understanding. And that I like to call, I guess, that's That's not my chip on the shoulder. We're gonna beat the other side. Activism. It's like the opposite of activism. It's like anti-activism.